to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Grand John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. Today's date is April 23rd, 2025. This is the A block, which means we start just after 7 o'clock. I'm Brad. That is John. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning to you, Brad.
We bring this guy along because he is the authority on what's going on in the state of Missouri every single day for the past 23 plus years. He puts together this incredible website chronicling all the stories you should know about. And what you do is you go to his site, you click on the links, it takes you to these stories, and you find out all the important stuff. We start off the show every morning with this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And his job is to...
Now on with the countdown.
And we start off with...
In third place...
Pair of dueling headlines from two of St. Louis's best reporters. I would say, Brad, that they're two of Missouri's best reporters. Jason Rosenbaum of St. Louis Public Radio and Austin Huguelet of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I call them dueling headlines, but really they're complementary. They just have a slightly different take on a battle going on between Democrats in St. Louis City. Here's Austin's headline. St. Louis abandons lawsuit against state takeover of police. Spencer Green trade Barbs. Now, Rosenbaum's headline, lawsuit over state control of St. Louis police in flux as Spencer and Green disagree. So Cara and Megan, the brand new mayor and the president of the Board of Aldermen, respectively, are either disagreeing or exchanging barbs here. In other words, Brad, they have a dispute over the lawsuit that we talked about last week. You will recall that in her last day in office, Tashara Jones gave a parting shot to the state of Missouri. The St. Louis City sued the state and said, hey, here's some problems with the bill that gives the state more influence over the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Now, Cara Spencer has been a little less enthusiastic about the lawsuit. And in fact, that leads us to yesterday's headlines, Brad, and this morning's headlines, that the city is abandoning the lawsuit. Spencer said that she put out a statement saying that she was, quote, evaluating our options and weighing the merits of refiling a sound suit in state court. In other words, she's not closing the door on doing something about this and stopping the state, quote unquote, takeover of police. But she says, technically, this isn't the way to do it. And Megan Green, for her part, was nonplussed about this. And she had her spokesman, a guy named Yusuf Danishar, came out and said, the president, being Megan Green, in her official capacity, reached out to the city councilor's office this afternoon to seek continued representation. If the city councilor's office is instructed by the mayor to refrain from representing the president in her official capacity, the president will seek outside counsel. So to cut to the chase, Brad, Megan Green is saying, hey, Cara, if you're not on board with this and you're not going to be any help, we're just going to go get our own outside counsel and we're going to do it ourselves. So a little tension here, Brad, between maybe more than a little tension between top Democrats and St. Louis City. Another piece of important context was brought to us by Jack Suntrup in a separate piece in the Post-Dispatch, and he noted that Governor Kehoe appears to be on track to appoint the transition director to oversee the transition of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department, plans on making that appointment by Friday. So we have a lot going on in a short period of time here in St. Louis City.
John, you didn't amplify much on the kinky nature of this story.
Ooh, what's that? Now, are you talking about someone's hair?
No, not at all. You said a lot of people don't know this, but both Cara Spencer and Megan Green have significant others in their lives named Barb. and you said the two were exchanging barbs. I'm thinking to myself,
Oh,
wow.
wow. That sounds very polygamous, Brad.
Kind of kinky. And by the way, we didn't mention that. I think I sent that to you Monday. Jane Dueker, in one of her posts on X, once again gave the definitive breakdown on how many police officers in the city of St. Louis they're actually out on the street. And what was the number? 400, John? Wasn't that what it was by the time?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, you sent me the screenshot of Jane's tweet. I mean, she keeps a pretty close eye on that stuff.
Yeah, and the sad part of it is they say, well, there's 865 police officers, but she breaks it down that there's so many of them who are essentially on disability. There's so many of them who are essentially burning up their leave time before they retire. So many of them who are this, so many of them are that, so many of them are white shirts, which are the officers. And I mean, they're like ranked officers, lieutenant on up. And that leaves 400 officers to patrol the streets of St. Louis 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you think, man, that's not very many people as police officers. So that's the problem right there. John, do you think this is going to go anywhere? Do you think they're going to actually, don't you think it's inevitable that the state's going to essentially have their way with the city as far as the police are concerned?
I think that it's unstated in these pieces. I think that Cara Spencer will choose to not challenge Mike Kehoe's effort here. I think she's going to go along with what the governor says. I think she's going to operate in good faith and take a wait and see approach. And she noted one of these pieces, either Austin or Jason pointed out in their piece, confirmed that, the governor spoke to Cara Spencer immediately after her election, and they talked about their plans. I would see Cara not picking a fight with Mike Kehoe right away. And I would also say, I'm not sure if where Cara is exactly on this issue compared to what she might have said publicly. But at a certain point, you're looking to separate yourself from the previous regime. And to have Megan Green, an avowed opponent of yours, out there trying to beat you over the head with this, I don't think it encourages Cara Spencer to take Megan Green's side on this.
Well, I also think there's a little bit of where I came from in this whole escapade because of the fact that, remember, that Mike Kehoe was born and raised in North City. And have we had a governor that's been from St. Louis in a long, long, long time? Can you remember the last governor that was essentially an original resident of the city of St. Louis? I mean,
yeah, not since you were a kid in the early 1900s, Brad.
I was going to say, because most of them are usually outstate, dudes like Parson. Well, I take that back. Now, let's go back. Greitens technically was a resident of the city of St. Louis, but some people would say, he really wasn't.
Yeah, and much like I don't believe he was from here.
No, he's not.
I mean, I could be mistaken. Where was he from?
I think he was from Mars. I think that's...
Yeah, he might be from Mars. And he's from Mars, and Megan Green is from Venus.
That's right.
She's actually from upstate New York. Did you know that, Brad?
Megan Green is?
Yeah. I went to her bio today, and her campaign still touts the fact that she's a professor at Washington University. So if I was a candidate looking to run for election again in 2 years, or I had a high profile position, I would probably make sure that my campaign people were competent enough to keep my bio updated, right?
So she's not a professor. Didn't she get booted from Washington University? Wasn't that the deal over the protests?
Yeah, I think she was replaced. I don't know if it's fair to say. Okay, I think it is fair to say she was booted. And I looked up as well, Brad, the anniversary. We're coming up on the anniversary of all the protests at WashU that happened on April 27th.
Well, no
was
kidding.
D-Day at WashU, those Palestinian protests. We're coming up on the anniversary.
Hard to believe it's been almost a year ago. Okay, moving on to number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Here's a story from the Missouri Independent. And Brad, I did a little bit of independent research here, pardon the expression. I mispronounced Rebecca Rivas' name yesterday. I called her Rebecca Rivas. So I went back and I listened to her say her own name a few times on various videos, and she pronounces it Rivas. So we'll have a mnemonic device going forward, Brad. We will picture Rebecca sitting down with some South County Hoosiers off Rivas Barracks Road, smoking some ditchweed, and that way we'll remember that Rebecca's last name is pronounced Rivas. Picture her next to a bunch of guys in tank tops working on the transmission in the front yard, okay? Rebecca Rivas Barracks. That's how we'll remember it. Anyway, Rebecca has a piece in the Independent. Missouri campaign watchdog is once again unable to function due to vacancies. This is a bit of a carryover story from last year in which there were vacancies on the Missouri Ethics Commission. Folks serve for a predetermined amount of time, and then they need to be replaced by the governor. So to cut to the chase, Brad, Governor Kehoe has apparently not prioritized replacing members of the Missouri Ethics Commission. And this piece highlights a gentleman named Brad Ketcher, who's a Democrat attorney, prominent Democrat. We've mentioned him in the previous 2 weeks, Brad. He's quite involved in Democratic campaign politics, a widely respected guy. And he's been talking about the fact that Rebecca quotes him in here essentially saying, hey, when he worked for Carnahan, you wouldn't want a headline that says Carnahan fails to appoint ethics members. You know what I mean? So Ketcher points out as well in here, the Democrat points out, hey, Kehoe probably has other priorities in his first year as governor, but you still can't leave the Ethics Commission without a quorum. Because, Brad, if you have ethics complaints, and Rebecca does a good job here pointing out a specific complaint coming from Brad Ketcher, where if the commission does not address a complaint in a certain period of time, usually 90 days, then the complaint is just dismissed. Now, Ketcher filed his complaint on a separate topic. Again, the same complaint. But his point is, look, unless you have a quorum on the Ethics Commission, there's no point in having an Ethics Commission. This seems pretty straightforward, that the governor's got to put somebody from his team on this. And the governor has a lot of priorities. We just talked about the police department, Brad, in St. Louis City. He's got tax cuts. He's got education. We know a lot is on his plate. But come on, you got to have somebody working on these appointments.
Man, I don't know. Is it that tough to get somebody on this commission?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think it is, Brad. But, in defense of Kehoe, when you do these appointments and you have a team that's focused exclusively on appointments, you have a lot of people where you say, okay, we want a geographic mix of people. If you were a Democrat, you would say, okay, we want people of a certain skin tone or a certain orientation or whatever. We don't have to worry about that as Republicans. But you probably have a list of people who have expressed interest in being on the Ethics Commission, and you want to go to their state senator and you want to make sure that the state senator is on board, and you want to make sure that nobody's got a problem with any of these people because of some beef from 20 years ago. So there are a lot of headaches in appointing somebody to an ethics commission, but I would agree with Brad Ketcher here. It's pretty important. And also, it just looks bad. Like, what is the point of having an ethics commission, and an ethics commission that gives fines to people for breaking ethics laws if there's no enforcement? And by the way, Brad, what happens if the Missouri Ethics Commission finds someone, FINES, finds someone for, some transgression, and they get sued for, 20 grand or something, and nobody goes and actually collects the money? And the people that were fined actually just go out and, create another BS committee to try to launder some money. What's the point of having an ethics commission if there are no teeth?
Well, all they got to do is turn it over to the Department of Revenue, because they're like tigers. If you owe them 30 cents from a sales tax report that you didn't file, they'll come after you. They'll be at your door. They'll be knocking at your door. That's what they do. Just turn it over to DOR.
And they did that to you, Brad. But thankfully, we know from you that you have your own concierge service. And they go to the concierge and they sit down, and their butt's not even in the seat for 5 seconds before you call their number and you address their complaint, right, Brad? Brad, for folks who haven't heard before, where do you go to get your multiple license plates for your number of derelict vehicles?
Thanks, John. Jefferson
the next time you buy a car from a dead woman that smells like mothballs and regret, where do you go to get the license plate?
Jefferson
Brad?
City, John. And I told you the last time I was there, which was last month, all the stories about, oh my God, the lines at the DOR are out the door. Everybody trying to get their real ID. I went down to Jefferson City, walked into floor 3, got my license plates. I was in and out in 5 minutes, asked the concierge. I say, where's the place where I get my driver's license? He says, take that elevator right there, go up to the next floor, make a right, and you're there. I did it, walked in, nobody in line, took my eye test, which I almost failed, which is another whole another story. got my picture taken, and you know what? And now there's a thing which is bothersome to me that it automatically corrects your head. I usually tilt my head when they take my picture, but I did tilt my head, and I kept thinking to myself, because this lady was nice. She says, "You like that picture?" "No, take another one." And I go, "I tilt my head," and she says, "It corrects for tilted heads now." See, they're helping us.
First of all, Brad, you've always needed something to fix your head. Let's be honest, I could use it too. Why do you tilt your head in pictures?
Because of the fact that, see, once again, you can be normal, or you can be someone who sticks out from the crowd. And I do not want to be normal. That's all there is to it. Okay.
I'm guessing that's your way of covering for the fact that there's some sort of you have some sort of nerve damage or just eccentricity.
I do. The nerve damage is called being in the radio business. That's what it is. Okay.
And dealing with John Combest for almost 18 months. You know who doesn't want to deal with John Combest? People in an El Salvador prison. Can we get to number one?
The number one.
Courtesy of the Annie Fry Show. U.S. Congressman Jason Smith, down from the beautiful southeast part of the state. He's the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee in the U.S. House. And he was recently on a trade mission, and he went to El Salvador. Now, that's pretty great timing, considering how much El Salvador has been in the news. Jason Smith went to a place where Jason said he wouldn't even call it a prison. He would call it a place where they have captured terrorists, essentially. And one of the guards there brought out a couple MS-13 gang members. I guess I just stepped on my own punchline, Brad. The guard brought a couple prisoners out and asked them to remove their shirts. And I know that you're about to make this into an erotic film, Brad. But the gentlemen lifted their shirts, and they had MS-13 tattoos. So Jason Smith learned a little bit from the guard and from his visit there about a little bit more about MS-13 than even he already knew. Smith hit on a couple highlights here. First of all, Annie asked him, "Hey, how prevalent is MS-13 throughout the country?" Jason said he learned that they're all over. Like, we should anticipate that MS-13 folks are in every part of the country because of Biden's open borders. And one more anecdote I thought was interesting. Annie asked him, "Hey, with the Trump budget, it's a really narrow margin. How are you going to keep everybody in line?" And Jason Smith pointed out, yes, we can't afford to lose more than like 3 votes on any issue. Jason Smith says that they've had a lot of cohesion on these issues. Frankly, Brad, I am surprised that there's been so much Republican cohesion on this, because when you have such a thin majority, you're going to have all you need is a handful of people to make their own demands, to be rabble-rousers, to try to get whatever kind of attention they want by killing a bill. So in my mind, it's been pretty impressive, I guess you could say, that there has been the GOP unity on the Trump budget. Anyway, Annie Fry, top link on my website today.
You know what, John? Is that it?
That's it, Brad.
Are we done? No comments on my part?
On no comments of you tilting your head or what?
Okay, I'm going to essentially tease the beginning of what we're talking about in B Block. And if you remember the old Jim Croce song, "You Don't Mess Around with Jim." Remember that one?
Yeah,
you don't
do
mess
remember
around
that.
with Jim. Okay, I think there's going to be a new version of that called "You Don't Mess Around with Kristi." Okay, you ready for this?
I'm ready.